Fantasy Focus Football is presented by Geico. Switch to Geico and see all the ways that you could save. And we are back. It's like the first day of school, Daniel Dopp.
Yeah, man. I'm ready for this. It's
New
like
season's upon us.
Football is here. It's what we've been waiting for up until this point. It's like, okay, you know how you had that summer break and your summer break just wasn't long enough?
Okay.
I feel like summer break wasn't long enough, but I'm also still excited that school is returning. Am I allowed to do both of those?
Certainly both things can happen at the same time, but it's great to be back with everybody here for yet another season of the Fantasy Focus. Thanks to everybody that is tuning in. There are a lot of ways to watch us and listen to us every single day. The podcast will be available wherever you get to your podcasts. In the meantime, if you want to watch live daily at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, you can do so on the ESPN app. You can do so on the ESPN Fantasy Facebook page. You can do it on the ESPN YouTube page as well. We certainly encourage those who do watch on YouTube to get involved in the chat. And then, of course, on X as well, or Twitter, whatever you want to call
whatever
it.
We're calling it.
This is my Arrowhead Stadium.
That's it.
Right?
Hey.
Like Arrowhead Stadium is forever Arrowhead Stadium, with all due respect to Jiha, I believe it's now called. I think it's Arrowhead Stadium at Jiha Field or something.
Yeah.
It's Twitter. If you want to watch us on Twitter, you can do so at Fantasy Focus. Best way to find all the information. We have a ton to get to today, Daniel, but I couldn't be more excited for the season ahead. We are here all the way between now and the end of the playoffs. We're going to do our best to get you as ready as we possibly can for your upcoming drafts. Then once the season begins, we're going to help you build a championship roster. Couldn't be more excited about what's ahead.
Field, I need a championship roster, so I'm going to be listening in on this. Hopefully you've got some nuggets you're going to share with me as well.
I'll share a couple with you.
That's all right?
So we have a lot to dive into today, by the way. We might, if we have time, get into some of the offseason storylines that we've been discussing for the past 5 months.
We'll try.
But there are also podcasts available for those that have been listening to the once-a-week version.
Well, spoiler alert, there's just a lot of news, Field.
There is a lot of news. Yeah, because we also have some burning questions we're going to dive into to look ahead. But let's begin with some news, Daniel, and you take it away from here because we have a mess in Indianapolis.
Yes, we do. Let's start with Jonathan Taylor after Jim Irsay decided to start a tweet storm. I don't know. I feel like this is a situation where it would be the old Herm Edwards situation. Don't press send.
Yeah, good idea.
Jim, what are you doing here? So, Field, we've had a lot of back and forth. Jonathan Taylor unhappy with the running back market. We saw some tweets from his owner, Jim Irsay. Now Jonathan Taylor is... There's a lot going on. I guess, why don't you lay it out for us as far as the NFI list and what could happen here?
Yeah, so people probably know this already. Jonathan Taylor did request a trade. He started on the PUP list. We told you on Thursday it seemed a little sketchy that he was on the PUP list. And then there was this quote from Jim Irsay, which followed a tweet, and this was one of the quotes from Irsay. Quote, "If I die tonight and Jonathan Taylor is out of the league, no one's going to miss us. The league goes on. We know that. The National Football League rolls on. It doesn't matter who comes and who goes, and it's a privilege to be a part of it." Philosophical Jim Irsay, perhaps. I'm not exactly sure how you would categorize this version of Jim Irsay, but in a league in which owners have as much motivation to do everything they can to protect their brand and to protect their own shield, Jim Irsay has gone AWOL and has caused a storm. And there is a very public battle brewing between the owner of the Indianapolis Colts, who not only signs up on contracts, but cuts and pays the checks, quite literally, and their best player in Jonathan Taylor, at least their best offensive player for now. And it seems very clear that Jonathan Taylor no longer wants to be an Indianapolis Colt. He did say last night, after reports came out that the team might be placing him on the NFI list because of a back issue, that he had no such back issue and that the reporters needed to get better sources. The NFI thing is important for a lot of reasons. We're going to get nerdy early on in this podcast, Daniel.
We are.
Most important reason is a player can be placed on the NFI list if he suffers an injury away from practice or not at the team facility. So if you're not part of the off-season workout program where they're lifting weights at the team facility, if you're on your own, if you're on a jog in the Bahamas and you twist your ankle and you break it and you're going to miss 3 months and that's going to cost you half the season, the team has the right to withhold any amount of your base salary that you're going to miss during the time that you're recovering. So when you get put on the NFI list, all of a sudden your money becomes a problem here.
Well, and this was in response to a trade request from Jonathan Taylor. What would it even look like for Jonathan Taylor to be traded from this team? Is that even a thing that we think is possibly in the cards? How do you trade a guy like that?
I have spent the past, it's probably been 2 or 3 days since we learned of this trade request. I've spent the past couple of days trying to find a team that I can make a legitimate case for. I wanted to come in today and say, I believe the fill-in-the-blank team should trade for Jonathan Taylor. I can't get there, Daniel. Here's the reason why. We all know how the running back market has taken shape recently. It has obviously been a tough go for these top running backs Jonathan Taylor being one of them, Saquon Barkley, obviously Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, you name it. All these guys. Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott, we'll talk about in just a minute as well. If you're a really good team who views Jonathan Taylor as the icing on the cake, you're not going to want to pay the Colts the draft capital that they want.
Right.
If you're a team that's already got a pretty good back, like just as an example, I don't know, if you're the Jaguars, you have Travis Etienne, you don't need to trade for Jonathan Taylor, right? Nope. There are teams that are bad that probably would get better with Jonathan Taylor on their team. The Cardinals would be a better team with Jonathan Taylor than they are right now. Why are they going to ship draft capital and spend a lot of money on a guy who might take them from like a 3 or 4 win team to a 4 or 5 win team, right? It's a bit of a rock and a hard place right now for Jonathan Taylor.
It's like you're trying to thread the needle of who could potentially use this guy, but is also in as a position that could win now. Because if you're trading for JT, you're trying to compete. But
it's a lot of money for a team that's trying to win right now. If you're the Chiefs and you want to trade for Jonathan Taylor, and we can make the case that, I mean, it's pretty obvious. He's the best running back on their roster if he goes to Kansas City, like he is on many rosters.
Sure.
You don't have $4.3 million to play with, right? And you're not going to trade away a second-round pick for Jonathan Taylor because you have to replenish the depth at other more premium positions year over year over year. As Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and guys on the defensive side of the ball Chris Jones become more and more expensive, the Chiefs are going to have to win by hitting in the draft. So Jonathan Taylor's trade request may turn into nothing, which could lead us to the next stage of this, let's call it showdown right now between the Colts and Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
I think the door is open to the possibility of him maybe missing games because of his discontent that he is feeling right now, Daniel. If he is on the NFI list and he remains there until the regular season begins, he's out for 6 weeks. That already means that you might miss Jonathan Taylor for the most important half of the fantasy regular season. We're not there, but it seems at least possible that Jonathan Taylor could miss some games during this fantasy football regular season, which is a shame for a guy who was the face of fantasy football just last year.
2 years ago.
Now, I get it. Yeah. Jonathan Taylor had a difficult year last year because of the injuries, but Jonathan Taylor was the consensus #1 pick in fantasy last year, and right now there is this cloud of uncertainty hanging over him. So I think people are wondering, what do I do? It's July 31st, so we kind of need to make sure that we clearly define that, like, if you're an early drafter, if you're somebody that is either doing mock drafts right now or somebody that is an early drafter because you've got a passionate league that is not concerned about developments that can take place over the next 5.5, 6 weeks.
Yep.
That's your prerogative. We would generally advise against it. But right now, if you're drafting, as I sit here and I pull up my running back rankings, there's kind of that tier, the top 2 guys are Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler amongst running backs. But as you start to look at that next tier of backs, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, if you're making the case to pick one of those 4, I think by default right now, just because of the possibility that something lingers into the regular season,
sure,
Taylor has to drop to the bottom of that RB1 tier. And that's something that 2 weeks ago, if you had asked me, I would have told you was unfathomable. And it all traces back to an NFL owner who decided to speak up for reasons that make absolutely no sense now, and they make less sense than they did when this first began before our Thursday show, when it seemed like he had already tweeted too much. It's gotten decidedly worse.
It's just making it harder. Just making it harder on everyone around him, on the team, on his GM, on everybody involved. Jim Irsay sending out these tweets.
Totally screwing his GM.
Doesn't do any good.
By the way, think about the job that his GM, Chris Ballard, now faces.
Yeah.
All right, let's say that the team is going to, and Jim Irsay has said very clearly, we're not trading Jonathan Taylor.
Yep.
Speaking out of both sides of his mouth, yeah. Not now, not in October when the deadline is what he said. So the Colts simultaneously are reticent to pay Jonathan Taylor top dollar. They also don't want to trade him. But by the way, if they were to trade Jonathan Taylor, make one thing very clear. Let's just say they were to entertain this idea of trading Jonathan Taylor, who is a very, very talented player, even at a devalued position. They're not like, it's not going to be that Adam Schefter tweets one day, hey, the Kansas City Chiefs have acquired Jonathan Taylor for a 6th round pick.
Right.
The Colts don't want to pay him a lot of money, but they're not going to give him away either. It's why there's this rub right now. It is going to be extremely difficult to find a trade partner for Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
So I figured, let me at least come to the table with one team. One.
Is there one?
this feels like a dramatic stretch, but I'll just lay out a possibility.
The one team we have is a dramatic stretch.
And this is a dramatic stretch. I think this is extremely unlikely, but I'm just trying to find a way to thread the needle of circumstances that would be required to facilitate such a trade. We got news yesterday that both Kenneth Walker III and Zach Charbonnet, the top 2 Seahawks running backs, are dealing with various injuries. Charbonnet's got a shoulder injury. Sounds like there's some mystery surrounding that. Ken Walker's got a groin injury. Did not sound like Pete Carroll was particularly concerned, but it's July 31st. No reason to rush him back out there. In this weird world in which maybe that groin strain either gets aggravated later in training camp or doesn't heal as fast as Seattle wants it to, this is a team that has long marched to the beat of its own drum, personnel-wise. A few years ago, they made a trade which has not worked out for Jamal Adams, where they paid a big cost, 2 first-round picks at a devalued position, safety. Paid him a ton of money as well. Seattle wants to be in the playoffs again this year. They've got a phenomenal roster otherwise. 5 years ago, I might have bought it. I don't buy it, though. Like, even Seattle, like, I'm having a hard time finishing the case why Seattle should make a trade for Jonathan Taylor. So I think the most likely result, Daniel, is that Jonathan Taylor and the Indianapolis Colts continue to stare each other down, play a game of chicken, and they've got to decide over the next month whether they want to work together or whether this marriage is over. And if a month from now, this marriage has still not been resolved, we're going to have some really serious conversations about where you can justify drafting Jonathan Taylor.
Yes. Until
we get to that point, good luck finding a star in that backfield, because it's now Deion Jackson. It was fine last year, but still. Fine is probably as far as I would go. Zach Moss, former Bill, who was jettisoned in the trade for Nyheim Hines. And then Evan Hull, they took in the 5th round out of Northwestern. If it's not Jonathan Taylor, if this team wants to support Anthony Richardson right away, they might need to consider some depth in the backfield. Of note, by the way, Zach Moss got banged up earlier in practice, like 20 minutes before we came on.
Great.
A very thin backfield all of a sudden is much thinner.
So many things to follow within
Could do the whole show on Jonathan Taylor.
Honestly.
The whole show. I don't think he's getting traded, though. At least not anytime soon.
That'd be crazy.
I think it's a really hard deal to put together for all these factors that we've been talking about.
And we'll move on here. I think it's a good, what you said, though. You're trying to bring one team to the table, right? The Seahawks have 2 really young running backs. You're saying the Colts could get a young running back in return for Jonathan Taylor, which is what they were hoping to be able to do.
I think it would be a draft pick. Like, I don't think it would be Ken Walker or Zach Charbonnet.
So
I think it would just be like Seattle.
All 3 running backs?
They would just say, hey, this is simply for 2023. We're not going to extend Jonathan Taylor for $15 million a year.
That part's true.
It's a quasi all-in move. Again, sounds illogical to me, and I'm the one trying to make the case. So the point is that I'm having a really hard time. I would love to, at Fantasy Focus on Twitter, on X, or on the YouTube chat, like, if there's a team that comes to mind for you that you think to yourself, like, this is the right fit, send them our way, because I'm just having a hard time convincing myself that any team, really any team in the entire NFL right now, is the right fit to trade for Jonathan Taylor, pay the Colts what they want, and then pay Jonathan Taylor what he wants. It's hard to make everybody happy in this arrangement right now.
It's going to be tough. All right, next up, field. Joe Burrow was carted off with a calf injury. He was quarterback 4 last year. We've seen him be so good, continue to take steps each year of his career. It's only July, right? Teams, I think him being carted off was the idea of, like, we're going to play it safe. He's our franchise quarterback. But should we be reading into this more as fantasy managers trying to look ahead at Joe Burrow's fantasy value?
Not yet. Again, if you're an early drafter, I'll say this again, and I'll probably say it for the next, 7 or 10 days. If you're an early drafter, this is a good tiebreaker, right? If you go through the quarterback tiers, and by the way, tomorrow on the show, we're going to be discussing quarterback rankings, top 10 quarterbacks, tiers, thoughts on just a variety of different players. But, I'll spoil the beginning of it. My first tier of quarterbacks is 3 players: Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts. There's that next tier of quarterbacks that I would argue is composed of at least Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, Justin Herbert. You could maybe throw Trevor Lawrence in there. It's called 4 to 5 men, right?
Yep.
If you're drafting right now, again, you can plop Joe Burrow down to the bottom of it, because while it sounds like he'll be ready for the regular season, Daniel, until we know, we don't know.
Right.
So if he misses 1 or 2 games, 3 games maybe, and you could have 17 games of Justin Herbert versus 13, 14 of Joe Burrow, you would take that, because they're so closely ranked otherwise.
Yep.
But what I will say is that Joe Burrow his superpower for fantasy is not his legs. His superpower is that he plays in what was the pass-heavy offense in the NFL last year with incredible wide receivers, and he's just a sniper, right?
Yes, he is.
But quietly, Joe Burrow did impact things with his legs last year. So I think that having that calf at 100% a month from now is important to how I view his early season outlook. He had 5 rushing touchdowns last season, close to 250 rushing yards, right? Like, he's a good runner. He's definitely not, Lamar Jackson, right? But he's not a statue either, right? Like, this is not the next Tom Brady / Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning, as far as like fantasy, how he gets the job done in fantasy is concerned, right? Yeah, he has enough athletic ability that the rushing does matter to me, but too early for me to be overly concerned other than what I said. If you're drafting now, plop him down a few spots, but I still expect when we get to August 31st or so, I will continue to have Joe Burrow as right around quarterback 5, which is where I had him in my preseason ranks. I happen to have Lamar Jackson just one slot ahead of him.
I'm with you, though. Joe Burrow is firmly in that tier 2 of quarterback categories, and we're trying to figure out within that tier, right? I love the tier system because you're saying, which one of these guys do I like more? And it's a lot of times based on the situation that comes up.
A lot of tiers talk every day. A lot of tiers talk. Definitely this week, as we'll be going through all of our positional rankings, and tiers matters for reasons that we'll dive into very, very specifically.
All right, Field, I was watching the internet yesterday, and I saw...
What does that mean?
I watching the internet?
Yeah, like...
I think I was on X. I was on X watching videos, and I saw a team at training camp chant, Dalvin Cooks!
You're in Minnesota. You were not in Minnesota.
I was not in Minnesota. Yeah. I saw him. He was at Jets training camp.
How bizarre is this?
It was crazy.
It's like
that
surreal.
People in the stands were chanting, like, Dalvin, come on, baby. Come sign with us. What are you at on Dalvin Cook right now? Understanding they got Breece Hall still under center. This would be a great NFL move maybe for the team, but it might hurt us for fantasy if he goes there.
Yeah, we talked about this on Thursday, but just to reiterate and double down on it, sounds like Dalvin Cook still is very much in play for the Jets. He came on our show on Saturday, the back-together weekend, and he made it very clear he's interested in the Jets. Still interested in the Dolphins, but the Jets look like the leader in the clubhouse here. No deal done yet, Daniel. But yeah, I mean, sounds a little bit of stating the obvious here. But if he signs with the Jets, like the top percentile outcomes for Breece Hall are gone, right? And it makes total sense. One of the pieces of feedback that Jets fans had for me when I posted our conversation from Thursday was like, we don't care about fantasy football. We care about winning championships. My response is like, we care about fantasy football and fantasy football because it's kind of what we do. It's our job. So, yes, we're going to talk about the fantasy football outlook here. Breece Hall right now for me is, and we talked about how difficult of a player he is to rank. But if you look at our running back rankings right now, Breece Hall currently slots in consensus ranks at 15th. I've got him at 16th, so right in line there. But you have a couple of us amongst the rankers that have him as high as 10. I see him as high as 11 in somebody else's rankings. Dalvin Cook comes, I think he gets pushed down closer to like 22, 23, right? I mean, A, it forecasts that the Jets are going to use Dalvin Cook a lot. You don't sign him not to use him a lot. And B, it empowers the Jets to slow play Breece Hall's recovery even more than they already are. He's on the PUP list. That's different from a guy like Javonte Williams. The Jets have been very clear. They're going to be extremely cautious with Breece Hall because as talented as he is and as good as they want to be this year, they need Breece Hall to be awesome for them for like the next 5 years.
Right.
Or given how running back contracts go, like the next 3 years, right? So Dalvin Cook signs tomorrow. Breece Hall, I think, goes maybe from like RB15 to like potentially, as I look at some of the players, 19, 20, 21. I mean, you've got guys like Alexander Madison and Dameon Pierce, Miles Sanders there. Dameon Pierce is a better player than all of them. I'm sorry, excuse me. Breece Hall is a better player than all those guys. I certainly believe he's a more special talent than all those guys. But his role, I mean, we talk about, volume's going to go down dramatically. And maybe the Jets' mindset does alter a bit as well. Like, hey, we don't need him week 1. Maybe we kind of like, 8 or 9 carries in week 1. 10 or 12 in week 2. Maybe he has a few weeks where we get him to like 15 or 18. But we're the two-headed attack in the backfield, and that works for us, a la Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon in Green Bay.
And the ultimate slow play with them being able to bring their young kid back at a time where they don't have to rush him, but they can still make sure that they're trying to capitalize on whatever window Aaron Rodgers has left, right?
But they don't care about fantasy football. They care about an Aaron Rodgers who clearly is running this thing right now or has a lot of influence. Like, if he wants Dalvin Cook, he just gave up $35 million of pay. They might very well get Dalvin Cook because that's what Aaron Rodgers wants.
That's what he's looking for. Yep, totally with you on that. All right, one more piece of news here. Field, Zeke
Similar
visits
vein,
the New England Patriots. Is this something that is like really serious? Are we going to start seeing some of these running backs visiting teams, or are they just going to be kicking tires because, hey, we're getting close to training camp and I got to find someone to sign with?
This is serious, definitely. The Patriots do have a pretty glaring need at RB2 behind Ramondre Stevenson.
Yep.
As we all know, Pierre Strong, Kevin Harris, they had James Robinson, they cut him. It's thin. It's thin right now for the Patriots. They need a second running back. They have had interest in Leonard Fournette. They've had interest in Dalvin Cook. They've had interest in Zeke, who's been with them over the weekend. I think there is a real shot that Zeke signs with the Patriots, and there's no two ways to spin this, Daniel. It's bad news for Ramondre Stevenson.
Yep.
Again, stating the obvious, I know, but the Ramondre Stevenson right now, pre anybody signing with the Patriots, are like, okay, so he's going to carry the ball a ton. He's going to play just a ton of snaps in general. The Patriots, other than when both Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson were hurt last year, I think it was maybe against like the Cardinals or something. It was one of those late season games in prime time. They did not rely on Pierre Strong or Kevin Harris. Maybe they'll be a bit more likely to as second-year players, but still, they have a very thin depth chart behind Ramondre Stevenson. Should catch a healthy number of passes, not as many as last year, but a healthy number. Should have some rushing touchdown upside. If Zeke signs with the Patriots, Zeke is not the player he was, obviously, several years ago, but Zeke has a couple of things that we know he can still do well. He's a very good goal line finisher.
Goal line,
right? He did that very well for the Cowboys last year.
Yep.
He is very durable, has largely stayed healthy throughout his career, and he's a great pass-protecting running back, which is not that we get pass protection fantasy points, but it means more snaps, and that would mean fewer snaps for Ramondre Stevenson. I've got Stevenson as RB10 right now, Daniel. If the Patriots were to sign Zeke Elliott by the end of the day today, I think Ramondre Stevenson might all of a sudden fall from like RB10 to more like RB13, 14. So right now, Ramondre ahead of guys like Travis Etienne and Joe Mixon. I think he could be more in the conversation with the Aaron Jones, Najee Harrises of the world. Guys who, at least in the case of Najee Harris, should be the clear-cut back for his own offense, even if I think that Ramondre and Najee, I think, are. I'm not going to start a Ramondre Stevenson versus Najee Harris talent debate, but I think that's kind of the territory that he would fall into. A mid-tier RB1, mid-tier RB2, as opposed to a low-end RB1. Again, same thing we said about the Jets. I get why the Patriots would want to sign Zeke Elliott.
Yeah.
They need a second running back. If the price is not prohibitive, you could probably do worse than Zeke. But if Ramondre Stevenson is your favorite target right now amongst those like low-end RB1 guys, it takes a damper if Zeke signs there. And by the way, Zeke, if he were to go there, and same with Dalvin, like I think they have like, I would say Zeke pretty clearly would have value, almost like what Jamal Williams was last year.
I was just going to ask
Just has to score touchdowns for him to be relevant. I don't think he's going to have a huge passing game role, and obviously he's not super explosive. Dalvin's a different conversation. I think he's got more juice, obviously, left than Zeke. But both of those guys would be the pretty, Zeke would clearly be, several spots behind Ramondre Stevenson. But if you have Ramondre on a dynasty roster, or if you're just targeting him in general right now in redraft, you should be hoping they don't sign Zeke, even though it sounds like they're going to eventually sign a second running back.
Isn't it annoying that these NFL teams are making NFL moves that don't fit our fantasy game very well, Field?
It's so, honestly, it's like a little bit disconcerting. Yeah, it really is, right? Like they should be thinking more and more about our chances to win various championships this year. Yes, you're 100% right, Daniel. It is.
There've been a handful
it's ridiculous, right? I hear coaches. I've heard coaches often mock fantasy football when they're discussing the running backs' roles, and you know what? Just don't like it. I don't like it at all, Daniel. I don't like it one bit, but my guess is that both Zeke and Dalvin Cook end up somewhere sometime soon, and that is obviously going to have a legitimate impact on whoever's team, whoever backfield they end up joining.
All right, Field, we're going to move on to the burning questions that we have from training camp now that it is underway. Are you ready, my friend?
Yes, I just want to say quickly on those two Seahawks running backs, not concerned about Kenneth Walker III, just to reiterate. It sounded like Pete Carroll is not. If you're looking for a name to store away as we get closer to the season, because the Zach Charbonnet injury is pretty uncertain at the moment.
Okay.
Kenny McIntosh, 7th-round pick out of Georgia, one of the best pass-catching running backs in the draft, but as we have talked about a lot recently, because top running backs aren't getting paid, one of the big reasons why, you can find an Isaiah Pacheco or a Kenny McIntosh in the 7th round, and if they get the opportunities, they can perform well. So don't overlook that name as we get closer to draft season.
True or false, Austin Eckler was an undrafted free agent?
Undrafted free agent out of Western State. Do you even know where Western State is?
I don't think, no. Western is in a state. So how is there Western? What is Western State?
It's actually in Colorado.
What?
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those schools that like recently changed names as well. If someone fact checks me and it's not, let me.
Okay, that's all right.
Eckler's gonna be so mad.
I won't hold you to it. No,
it's
that's fair.
It's a tiny school in Colorado that you're like, wait,
Good for him, though. I mean, all I'm saying is we have seen a handful of guys that have been drafted in those later rounds do some things here, especially with us in fantasy.
Western State, baby. That's right. Still confirmed Western State. Let me see if that has changed names recently. The Western Colorado Mountaineers. Now, I believe they were formerly known as Western State. Now they're Western Colorado. And that was where Austin Eckler played his ball as a completely overlooked recruit who ends up at a tiny, tiny school in the lovely state of Colorado. I wish I were there right now.
Yeah, heck yeah.
Actually, I'm happy to be here with you.
Oh, thanks, Field. I'm happy to be here with you. All right, let's talk about a couple of questions here. 5 burning questions we've got from training camp. Here's my number one question.
By the way, this list could be 500.
Could be so long.
So we'll hit 5.
Yep.
But there might very well be others that you can make a case that we should be asking as well.
Right, training camp doesn't end today, right? I can still ask more
we
training.
got plenty of time.
Okay, I can ask questions next. All right, so in his 6 games last year, Deshaun Watson in his return was quarterback 19 in fantasy points per game. Do you think Deshaun Watson will bounce back this year because last year was just knocking off the rust?
I do think he bounces back, Daniel. I think that last year, though, was about more than just the rust because, he had a lot of practice time with the Browns. He came back in early October, despite the fact that he didn't play until week 14 of the NFL regular season last year. He had a full training camp. We see other quarterbacks, Brock Purdy last year, who got 0 reps with the ones and then all of a sudden went undefeated until the 49ers lost when he got hurt in the NFC Championship game. Eagles were the better team, though, to be clear. But I think there was more to this. And so let's just start with the good things with Deshaun.
Okay.
He's been quarterback 1 for a full season.
Yep.
Not like a quarterback 1.
The quarterback 1.
The quarterback 1, the highest scoring quarterback in fantasy. The last season with the Texans, he led the NFL in either passing yards, passing touchdowns, or both. I should have had that stat written down.
I'll look.
And you know this, Daniel. In Houston, it's not like he was consistently playing with the Bengals wide receivers, right? He did have DeAndre Hopkins for a chunk of that. He also had Will Fuller as his number 1. But part of what was so incredible about the offense down there was that he was often doing it with an okay supporting cast. Mm-hmm. So let's go to Cleveland. Amari Cooper, very good player.
Great.
I love him a lot. We'll talk a lot about Elijah Moore, a guy that I'm very bullish on this season. David Njoku had a blossoming year last year. Great offensive line. So he doesn't need an elite supporting cast to be great. I think, though, there's something to be said about how the offense is going to shift this year. From what I understand, basically, Deshaun Watson went to Cleveland, and they wanted him to speak Kevin Stefanski's language. I'm speaking metaphorically, right?
Sure.
Come play my system, right? Everything I've heard out of Cleveland suggests that this year is going to be much more about getting back to what Deshaun knew in Houston, and an offense that was very, very productive for him. Extremely productive. Spread it out. Let him pick defenses apart horizontally and, of course, vertically as well. I think Deshaun Watson bounces back. And if you're looking for a silver lining from last year, there aren't many, but in 6 games, 36 rushing attempts. 6 per game. Do the math over a 17-game season. That's over 100 for Deshaun Watson.
That's pretty good.
That rushing can boost up his upside. I got him as quarterback 9 right now, Daniel. There were some really disconcerting things from Deshaun Watson on the field last year. Obviously, many other things disconcerting off the field last year. But the number of short-armed throws, misses on throws that are layups for Deshaun Watson, he hadn't played it for a while, but there's no way you just lose the ability to make the throws that he was asked to make last year.
Right.
I think the combination of expecting Deshaun to look more like himself, apparently has lost a lot of weight this offseason, get back to a sort of normal body type. The Browns playing a system that more caters to Deshaun.
Yep.
And a certainly good enough supporting cast. All those reasons lead me to believe that Deshaun Watson has the chance to be, conservatively, a top 10 quarterback. Him finishing as a top 5 quarterback this year, far from insane, even in a year in which we do have 3 bona fide megastars at quarterback. plus like 3, 4, 5 others, they could easily push for top 3 status.
Yeah, I think it's crazy that Deshaun Watson is that one guy that is later on in this QB tier list that I feel like if he finishes as QB1, no one's going to be surprised. We've seen a QB1 finish from him. I will say, in watching him take this next step, right? I'm curious when you talk about the offense is going to kind of shift to be more of like a Deshaun-led offense. This is not a conversation about the rest of the team, but I'm curious how that's going to impact the rest of the Browns and what that's going to mean. Because Nick Chubb has been a guy that they've given the ball to in a very specific way. He has been that offense for a long time. So, with all the pass catchers, like you mentioned, didn't even throw in DPJ. I love DPJ as a deep shot for him, too. He was a guy that looked great last year.
Yep.
Really interested to see what Deshaun can be.
I'm not getting overly concerned about Nick Chubb.
He's still going to do Nick Chubb stuff, right?
He's still Nick Chubb and should do a lot of Nick Chubb things. Right now, the backfield depth is very thin. Jerome Ford, the next man up.
Yep.
I'm keeping my eyes on if they spread things out like I think they might, it might decrease Nick Chubb's overall workload just a little bit, which I think kind of runs counter to what a lot of the narratives are surrounding Nick Chubb at the moment.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. All right. Next up, will the Buccaneers quarterback play matter less than we think, Field Yates? How do you go from the greatest quarterback of all time to Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask and feel amazing. Like, you know what? No big deal. We'll be all right here.
So recency bias, for better and worse, is a huge part of fantasy football.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, there are people that are like, even before this nuclear situation for the Colts, I'm out on Jonathan Taylor. He burned me last year. I'm not doing it again, right?
Yeah.
But it can also influence us to think a little bit rosier. And last year at this time, me, Field Yates, the person you're listening or watching right now, spoke many times about how concerned I was about the Seahawks offense with Geno Smith.
Oof.
And you know what happened, Daniel?
He
was awesome.
Yeah.
And we were wondering, can DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett have a top 25 wide receiver season? Lockett was wide receiver 13. Metcalf was wide receiver 16.
So the answer is yes.
So the answer is yes.
Yes.
And I would say this. Not that anybody is going to confuse Baker Mayfield for Tom Brady. And obviously it's been a disappointment relative to number 1 overall pick expectations. But up to this point in his career, Baker Mayfield's resume is better than what Geno Smith's resume was going into last season. Like, we saw Baker play competent football for the Rams. We saw him have a couple of, his rookie season was objectively very good for the Browns. Baker was there was a Baker moment in Cleveland, several of them, right? I'm just saying there are crazier things than Baker Mayfield playing well enough that Mike Evans and Chris Godwin have not top 10 or 12 seasons together, which was the case when Brady was humming at his best.
Right.
But that these guys can both end up salvaging top 20 to 22-ish seasons. That, to me, is something that I am going to try my best to balance what I've known about Baker Mayfield in the past with what I've known or what I will see over the next few weeks, because I personally expect it to be Baker Mayfield as a starting quarterback.
I was just going to ask you that. Kyle Trask, he's really like more the number 2 than 1B,
I think
right?
so. I'm not going crazy here on the Bucs receivers. I do have Godwin ranked a good amount ahead of Mike Evans right now.
Me
but
too.
I think there is something to be said for just don't dismiss the idea that good enough Baker Mayfield is actually more than enough for both of these guys to end up being pretty useful values at current cost.
Are you still on Mike Evans after everything he did to you last year? Because I know you made that comment about Jonathan Taylor, and I think that's ridiculous. But Mike Evans did burn me last year, and I do have some
days.
Emotional damage, I think is the words I would use from it.
And a tough one. I have him like right around wide receiver 30, Daniel, so I'm not going crazy here with Mike Evans. But I don't know. I'm not like we will do a show soon about like guys you got to leave the draft with and guys you got to avoid. It's not really how I roll. I'll explain it in more depth at that time.
Sure. Nuances.
But I think that Mike Evans, I will have a little bit of exposure to Mike Evans this year. Not an overwhelming amount, because I don't want to dismiss the possibility that the quarterback play is good enough. It's still Mike freaking Evans. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's got the longest streak to begin his career with at least 1,000 yards in every season. Literally nobody's done what he has done, and Chris Godwin is an absolute stud. Like, the talent does matter here.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Next up from our burning questions, how much less do you think Justin Fields or Lamar Jackson, who led all quarterbacks in rushing yards per game, will run this year? Are they going to have a dip in rushing production?
Let's talk narratives here, right? Justin Fields gets DJ Moore. They get Darnell Mooney back. Beefed up offensive line. running back. All of a sudden, they've got a bunch of running backs. Last year, the Bears ran the ball as much as they did because Justin Fields' top receivers were like Equanimous St. Brown and Dante Pettis, right? Guys who I'm not even totally sure if they're going to be on the team this year.
Sure.
Now he's got DJ Moore and Chase Claypool with a bit more exposure, and Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet, who did have a really good year for them last year.
He got paid too.
If he, do we want for fantasy? I think there's a pretty reasonable case that we would have been fine if the Bears did nothing and said, "Hey, Justin Fields, we're going to run you 200 times this year." That would have been wonderful. He was last amongst all quarterbacks in terms of completion percentage last year, qualifying quarterbacks last season. Is throwing the football a whole lot more for Justin Fields a good thing or a bad thing for his fantasy value? I think it tends to equalize, Daniel, because I think that he's throwing to better players. He'll be a better thrower. He's a gifted thrower. I don't doubt that at all. I think a lot of last year was about the pieces around him, right? I think the passing offense will be way more functional. So I think the expected total dip in rushing, which might be 15 to 20% of carries, maybe even yards as well, will be offset by the increase in passing. Then I'm still very in on Justin Fields. I have my eye on it. And it's comparable to what we're hearing in Baltimore, right? They make a change. All of a sudden, it's now Todd Monken filling in for, after many years, Greg Roman, taking over for Greg Roman, and he got a lot of flack. One thing you can't deny is that when Greg Roman was coordinating for Lamar Jackson, it was fantasy. I mean, it was perfect, right? It was great. He's had some amazing seasons.
All the rushing upside.
Yep. But all of a sudden, he's got a bunch of receivers. OBJ, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman might be wide receiver 3 on this roster. He's a first-round pick. Mark Andrews is still sizzling.
Yep.
Same deal. Like, I feel the exact same way that I do about Justin Fields, is that both Lamar Jackson and Justin Fields are way too gifted of both throwers and runners that from a throwing standpoint, I expect the improvement to be significant because of the weapons around them and the scheme around them.
Yep.
And I think that the rushing is way too potent for either of these teams to take it away in a meaningful way, that these two evolved and maybe regress down in terms of value amongst quarterbacks in fantasy.
I think that's really interesting because so much of their value, like we've already laid out, came from their legs. And if they're going to do that less, that passing efficiency having to increase, this situation kind of sets up exactly how you're playing out because both teams approached the situation and said, we're going to find ways to help make you better at this part of your job.
I'm putting my faith in Lamar and the fact that he has a season in leading the NFL in passing touchdowns. Like, that's already in his bag.
That's happening.
He literally had the most passing touchdowns during his MVP case. And then in college, and maybe this is because college quarterbacks are less inclined to be running a lot to protect their future value. Fair. Like, Justin Fields was slinging it back at Ohio State. Remember that game against Trevor Lawrence and Clemson in the national playoffs semifinals? Oof. Had 6 touchdown passes. Justin Fields can put it all over the yard. So I think both of these guys are way too capable of throwers that whatever rushing they lose will be more than offset. I've got Lamar at quarterback 4, Fields at quarterback 6, guys who you can make a case for even higher in your rankings.
I love that. I'm with you on that. All right, next up. Can Tua Tagovailoa stay healthy this year in order to help this Dolphins team?
Yeah, so I hate, and I proposed this question, so I'm sort of taking the blame here myself, is that like...
Poo-pooing your own question?
Poo-pooing my own question. What I would say to you, Daniel, is that like it's in some ways unfair to ask whether a player can stay healthy because every NFL player runs the risk on every single play, right? But Tua's, we've seen how much it matters. All right. If you subscribe to EPA per play, the Dolphins had the 5th best EPA per play when Tua was under center last year.
That's really good.
How many touchdown passes do you think Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle combined for last year without Tua?
Only because I've listened to this podcast over the offseason. I know the answer is 0.
0. Think about that. Think about how different the offense was with and without Tua. Now, maybe it's a little bit different. Maybe they feel like Mike White is a better backup option than what Teddy Bridgewater was. I'd say it's pretty close. I could certainly see it. Mike White did sling that thing last year for the Jets. Remember that game, 400 yards of Mike White?
So great.
Very normal. So, yes, the backup plan is better this year, but Tua staying healthy means the world to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle for their upside outcomes. And then I've got Tua as quarterback 11, Daniel. That quarterback, I think, and we'll talk about quarterback tiers tomorrow, but like right after that second tier, which is like the 8th or 9th highest rate quarterback on my board, it starts to get a little sort of curious amongst the quarterbacks. Like you can make, Aaron Rodgers versus Tua versus Kirk Cousins versus Geno Smith versus Dak Prescott versus guys like kind of that caliber. those are sort of subjective arguments, right? It might be that people have very reasonable approaches to any of them being the best of those 5. But Tua at quarterback 11, if he stays healthy, this Dolphins offense can hum. And we talked about this during the offseason. If you were to make a list of like as many players that you could conceive of being worthy of the number 1 overall pick in fantasy, I think this is a bit of a long shot. But Tyreek Hill, you could put into that conversation if you were to get 17 games of Tua, because for as great as Justin Jefferson was last year, Tyreek Hill was like right there in terms of total receiving yards. He had 99 fewer, did Tyreek Hill. And oh, by the way, look at his targets. He had 119 catches on 170 targets, a career high last year, over 14 yards per catch. You know he's good for a touchdown. He could be good for a touchdown on any play. That is tethered to Tua.
Yeah.
Mike White's better than I think than Teddy Bridgewater. I said,
but that's not going to happen with Mike White.
It's just not the same offense.
Right.
So Tua stays healthy. The ceiling is the roof for Tyreek Hill, to borrow a phrase from the GOAT himself, Michael Jordan.
And they're going to need Tua to stay healthy in this division as well. This is going to be one of the toughest divisions in football this year.
Yep. AFC East. I mean, the whole thing is freaking loaded, right?
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
All right, Phil, last question for our burning questions from training camp for today.
Yeah. Many more to come.
Many more.
Are the Dallas Cowboys really committed to running the football as much as they've talked about with CeeDee Lamb?
Yep.
And they brought in Brandon Cooks.
Yep.
And Michael Gallup is back and hopefully healthy now.
Yeah, so actions versus words, right? Credit to our friend Mina Kimes, friend of the podcast, who brought this up a while ago. It was sort of like Mike McCarthy keeps saying, we're going to run the ball, like we're going to run the damn ball. And yet, first of all, they were 6th in the NFL in either rush attempts or rush percentage last year. They ran the ball a lot last season, right? I mean, Zeke had a monster year as the backup running back to Tony Pollard. Moreover, though, Daniel, like they now have, as you mentioned, one of the best receiving trios in the NFL, and Dak Prescott's healthy. And I would think that if the Cowboys are taking a look at the best way for them to be great this year, it might be relying on the arm of Dak Prescott, because their running back backfield, the running back depth chart is thin beyond Tony Pollard, and Pollard's coming off of a fractured leg in January. So I'm wondering if what Mike McCarthy has been messaging will actually come close to how the Cowboys operate on offense.
That's a really great question, because if things stay the way they are, Tony Pollard, just like you just said, Tony Pollard's ceiling is the roof in this offense if they don't go out and grab somebody else.
That one feels like they're going to have to.
They have somebody, to, right? Like if I'm drafting now and I draft Tony Pollard being like, yep, this is my guy, but I'm not expecting someone else to be there, I think I'm setting myself up for failure.
Maybe I'm wrong, but it just feels Malik Davis and Ronald Jones are the backups right now.
Doesn't inspire confidence, I think is what I would say.
Zeke still hanging out there. Maybe he goes to New England, but Zeke, a return to the Cowboys has not been ruled out for Zeke. And if that happens, Pollard was excellent last year with Ezekiel Elliott, but the path to an RB1, top 5, top 8 season for Tony Pollard can be prevented with a return from Zeke Elliott, because he'll probably get a large chunk of the goal line work as we saw last season. Man. But I'm keeping my eyes on this offense, because Dak, he could easily be a top 10 quarterback. We've seen that before, right?
Absolutely.
Up until last year when he kind of sputtered because of the injury and just inconsistent play and all the interceptions. Like, you were counting on Dak being a weekly starter at quarterback, even in a 10-team league. He had shown himself capable of that. If the Cowboys throw the ball as much as their personnel suggests they can, we could see a monster year from Dak.
Dallas Cowboys had the 6th most rush attempts in the NFL last year.
Okay, yeah. So that, for a team that wants to run the ball more. What do you want to go from 6th to 3rd? You're going to run. They ran it a ton. They are not a team that struck me as like, wow, we don't run the football enough, right? Like, this was not the Bengals, who, as I mentioned, were the past heaviest team in terms of percentage of called passes last season.
All right, we're going to be back with some off-season storylines in a second, but first we got to pay some bills, Field Yates.
Geico asks, how would you love a chance to save some money on insurance? Of course you would. And when it comes to great rates on insurance, Geico can help, like with insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and RV, even help with homeowners or renters coverage, plus add an easy-to-use mobile app, available 24-hour roadside assistance, and more. Geico is always an easy choice. Switch today and see all the ways you could save. It's easy. Simply go to geico.com or contact your local agent today.
Take your shot at huge wins with DraftKings Sportsbook. You could win big with money lines, props, parlays, and more. Right now, new customers can score $150 in bonus bets instantly for betting just $5 on anything.
Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FFF. That's code FFF only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net in partnership with Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races. All games regulated by West Virginia Lottery. Please play responsibly. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-777 or visit ccp.org. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/baseball terms. All right, Field Yates. Coming back, and we only have a few minutes left. We're going to dive into a bunch of our off-season storylines just to get everybody caught up.
Yeah, let's do it like let's try to do this in like a wrap. It's like a 2-minute drill, right? You and I have the ball.
Yep.
We got to score a touchdown in the next minute and 17 seconds. We've got one timeout. And you're Travis Kelce and I'm Patrick Mahomes, or vice versa.
Well, if there's one quarterback that I'm trying to use in the 2-minute drill, it's probably going to be Aaron Rodgers.
Field Yates,
and he is now with the New York Jets, as we mentioned earlier on in the show.
Yep, he is with the New York Jets. He gets traded there this offseason, Daniel. He was quarterback 14 last year, which feels crazy because he didn't have 20 points in a single game last season.
Not one game.
Yeah, but I am subscribing to the theory that Aaron Rodgers is ticked off, that he is, listen to him. He is like... He's found the fountain of youth. He sounds rejuvenated.
Sean Payton taking a shot at his coach helped.
He was not happy. Yeah. He does have good weapons. He has good enough weapons, right? Garrett Wilson, star.
Great.
Allen Lazard, we know what the relationship is there. Good backfield, maybe even better with Dalvin Cook. The weapons are good enough. Rodgers is obviously a very motivated player. Not going to do a lot with his legs. They're going to play a lot of really difficult defenses, especially in their own division, Daniel. I think he has a chance to hover around quarterback 10 this year.
That's fair. All right. You already heard us talk about Zeke and Dalvin Cook, both on the move, potentially going somewhere else. Let's talk about Darren Waller. Moving from Oakland to the Giants, giving Daniel Jones now an option at the tight end position. How are you approaching Darren Waller?
Into his 30s now, so you got to be concerned about the age. You got to be concerned about the injuries. Obviously, that's been a big problem for him in his career. But another guy who I think is ticked off after being traded, or was ticked off, now got traded and is a very happy man here. And he's the best pass catcher the Giants have on their roster.
Absolutely.
Along with Saquon I've got him as a top 5 play at tight end this year. A little bit trepidatious just because of the health concerns in the past. But if I'm drafting a Giants pass catcher this year, it's clearly Darren Waller. I suspect a big season. I know this team internally feels like he can be the difference maker in the passing game for them.
Heck yeah, that would be awesome for fantasy. All right, the Tennessee Titans have officially signed DeAndre Hopkins, giving Ryan Tannehill a real wide receiver to work with. But what is Nuke going to look like in this Titans offense?
I think pretty similar to what he has in prior years.
Agreed.
Now, here's what you love about Nuke. He goes somewhere where he is a clear-cut wide receiver. One, I expect him to have challenge for 10 targets per game. Quarterback play is fine. I think Ryan Tannehill is a totally serviceable quarterback. He's not perfect, but he's won a lot of games with the Titans. He's been a reformed player with them. They have an extremely run-heavy offense. So even if Nuke has a 30% target share, all 30% target shares are not created equally. Think of what happened last year with Drake London as opposed to somebody with like Devontae Adams. So I've got him as like a low-end wide receiver 2, down from like a potential low-end wide receiver 1 in prior years. D-Hop absolutely feasted last year when he came back from injury. He had a ton of yards, ton of targets. Quarterback play is good enough. The volume should carry him into, like, let's call it wide receiver 15 to 19 range.
I still need Nuke to have 10 targets a game here in this Titans offense. I need that to happen.
He deserves it. He deserves it. No doubt he deserves it.
All right, the Philadelphia Eagles have added Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift to their backfield. This is an interesting one to break down because the Eagles were a super run-heavy team. But what do you do with these 2 running backs now? Because they still have Jalen Hurts under center.
I think you hope that you guess right on these guys.
I think that's the right way to look at it.
DeAndre Swift, most talented guy in this backfield now. But, with him, injuries are concerned. Very good in the passing game. The Eagles throw the ball very little to their running backs, partly because Jalen Hurts runs the ball so much. A lot of running quarterbacks don't throw it to the backs nearly as much. Same thing with Justin Fields. Same thing with Lamar Jackson. We've seen this with, a lot of running quarterbacks. That's sort of part and parcel for that position or that style of play.
DeAndre Swift only had 147 touches last year as a part of needing to stay healthy.
Yep, so got to stay healthy, and the Eagles, I think, are going to give zero craps about our fantasy football team.
Yes,
so
accurate.
I am okay with pretty much all of them at cost right now for Rashad Penny, RB28. Swift, RB28, Penny, RB37. In a perfect world, Rashad Penny stays healthy and could literally lead the NFL in either yards per carry, rushing touchdowns, or go over 1,000 yards. It's going to have a lot of things go right for Rashad Penny, but a perfectly reasonable roll of the dice where he is being priced at right now at RB37.
If Rashad Penny leads the league in touchdowns, that means something happened to Jalen Hurts, and I don't like how that scenario works out.
Or the Eagles are just a bit more protective of the guys. I mean, you're right, but they had 32 rushing touchdowns last year.
Yeah.
Like Miles Sanders had over 10 or had 10 last year.
Yep.
So there's a scenario in which they just allocate a bit more goal line work to Penny to protect Jalen Hurts going forward. And again, this is like what you're looking for Rashad Penny.
It's Jamal Williams. Yeah.
Yes. Which that's an outlier season. So Mike Clay is going to yell at us when he joins the show soon. But yeah, I mean, like you're looking for, let's call it the light version of that, right?
Yeah.
Like
It's touchdowns.
lots of volume in the running game and, lots of goal line opportunities in an offense that should be outstanding once again.
Should have a lot of goal line opportunities as well. Bears trade for DJ Moore finally give Justin Fields a legit number one wide receiver. Is it going to be enough to vault him up into that next tier, though, Field? We've already talked about how he's in that tier 2 of quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think that Fields kind of stays where he is, has a chance to, get close to like top 3, top 4 quarterback. But I think in this case, I'm more interested in what happens with DJ Moore, who and they now have a lot of players in Chicago that are just generally speaking upgrades compared to where they were last season.
Yep.
DJ Moore's a really, really good player, really consistent player. He got dogged by quarterback play last year. Bad quarterback play, injuries to quarterbacks. So DJ Moore, for me, I've got him as wide receiver 29 right now, which I think is a lot more reflective of the fact that there are good receivers kind of all over the board here. And the idea that in Carolina for a while, clear-cut number one guy. In Chicago, while I think he's better than Chase Claypool, I think he's better than Darnell Mooney, I think he's better than Cole Kmet. Enough competition there. And while I think, as we said earlier, the Bears will throw the football more, I don't expect them to be like in the top 8 of passing attempts this year.
Correct. I think we got to temper expectations. Justin Fields is still going to utilize his legs.
But I'm so excited. I mean, the Bears just like, what a great evaluation they can finally get on Justin Fields. If he doesn't do it this year, it's going to tell you a lot more about what his long-term future is. And he did it last year, by the way, with very little around him.
Yeah.
If he takes a big step back this year, it might be cause for concern. Or we're talking about him like this year's Jalen Hurts, which would be tremendous and great for the Bears, great for Justin Fields, and wonderful for our fantasy rosters.
Absolutely. What about OBJ moving to Baltimore? Is that something that can be wonderful for our fantasy rosters? Can OBJ recapture that top wide receiver talent that he's been in the past?
I don't know. So I think this is one where last week we talked about players of what they can be for 17 weeks versus what they can be for a little bit of time, right? Yep. Out of the gates, week 1, OBJ will probably be my highest ranked wide receiver for the Ravens.
Yep.
The question you have to ask when you arrive to the draft is, at what point do you stop looking for players that you expect to be whatever they are for the full season versus guys that you're saying like, you know what, this is my depth play that if he gets hot for the right period of time, he'll be a valuable part of my bench. I don't think OBJ is going to have a full 17 game season where his value just sort of stays neutral, right? Super talented player, obviously. Lamar loves him. A lot of buzz right now about Zay Flowers out of Ravens training camp. I'm going to hold steady, though, with OBJ. If I had to pick one as of right now, he is the Ravens receiver that I most want.
All right, 2 more to close this out. Derek Carr goes to the New Orleans Saints, gives the Saints hopefully a real quarterback under center to be able to lead this offense. Do you think that he has more fantasy value here in New Orleans than he did in Oakland? Or is it going to kind of be a wash and it's going to help more of those skill position guys?
Much more about the skill guys for me. And I'm going to do my best right now. I'm telling you this right now. I got this camera right in my face right now. I'm going to do my best, but it's going to be very difficult to restrain myself from going too far overboard with my excitement surrounding Chris Olave. I cannot get enough Chris Olave this year in fantasy. The price is tremendous. I think the guy is an absolute wizard. Garrett Wilson won the Offensive Rookie of the Year. These two guys are the same class of player. Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, teammates at Ohio State, comparable players. I think there is something to be said for us talking similarly about Chris Olave as we are Garrett Wilson right now. One of my favorite breakout players in all fantasy football this season. I've got him at wide receiver 14, Daniel, and I'm not sure that I might be too low low on him.
I'm with you.
Love Chris Olave this year.
I have him as wide receiver 14 as well. Love Chris Olave. All right, let's last one. Calvin Ridley returns from suspension, comes in to be the wide receiver 1 for Trevor Lawrence. Do you think that you can count on him to be a wide receiver 2 here in fantasy this year?
That feels to me like close to best case scenario, Daniel.
Okay.
Let's talk about this a whole lot more because this Jaguars offense is fascinating to pick
to
apart.
dive
I'm
into.
so happy to have you back in the NFL, though, Calvin Ridley. And I'm so happy that we are back here on the Fantasy Focus. We are back here tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time on all the different places
That's
that
right.
you can watch or listen to your podcast. For Daniel on Field, quarterback talk tomorrow. Find us at Fantasy Focus on Twitter.
X? I think it's X now.
Oh, sorry. On X. On X.
Wait, we're not, you're not on X right now, are you?
I am not. Not for
No. Okay, I was going to say
No,
me either. No. Let's just clarify that real quick.